material to share, to dive into. A lot of this actually was originally inspired by Stephen Buhner. I don't know if anybody was a part of. I know some of you were. Sareen was there each night that we went through the 5-part workshop series that he did in England. I was a part of that. And yeah, after being kind of profoundly influenced by that, I started to think about it in the context of food and nutrition, everything that I learned. And within that workshop, it was primarily oriented towards, herbs and herbalism, but obviously so much more and beyond, just really a way of showing up, a way of living. And so I took some of that inspiration and started to apply it to food and nutrition. And this was kind of the result. And it's been a while since I've actually touched into this material. So I'm excited to kind of get it out there again and to welcome your comments, your feedback. It's going to be a little bit different than most of my workshops. It's kind of part lecture, part poem, but all intentionally crafted with 100% inspiration, from my heart to yours, as we look to rekindle and awaken that part of you, each of us, that maybe we haven't trained and or given voice to. We all have it inherent within us, and it's about that acknowledgement and that nourishment. So I do have some notes to kind of keep me on track, kind of like a song sheet of music. Score, including some quotes I'll reference as well. But lots of short stories and lots of just kind of spontaneous sharing as well. So I think we are good to go. So we got our crew, we'll say, and yeah, let's dive in. So have you ever been confused about what to eat? I think we've all experienced that at one time or another, and hopefully we're moving our way forward down this path. And when I mentioned that this could be part, in collaboration with the other course, intelligent eating, it's really bringing together these two worlds of thinking and knowing. So whether intelligent eating is part one and this is part two, or this is maybe kind of a prequel, this is definitely a standalone on its own to get into this other side, right? I think we've all felt a conflict between what we think we should eat and what we really feel like eating. And my guess is that for most people, especially if you've been into the world of food and nutrition, you've been exploring this kind of on an intellectual side, my guess is that perhaps what you might need now is less nutrition science and more feeling. So in the next hour, 60, 90 minutes, depending how long we go here, you will learn how you can begin to trust and remember this innate intelligence of your body, especially when it comes to food, to become an intuitive eater, to be able to think like a nutritionist, but experience food like an artist, so you can enjoy greater health and happiness. We're going to explore intuition. What is it? How does it show up in our life, and how you can apply it to food and nutrition? Is my intention that you will walk away having demystified the concept of intuition, reveal to yourself that you are indeed intuitive, and that this can and should be the primary way to orientate yourself to food. And again, in the context of my food scope and intelligent eating, it's one way. The scope in intelligent eating is an acronym that stands for science, culture, opinions, and personal experience. And so this tonight is all about this emphasis on personal experience, this intuitive path of navigating the world of food and nutrition. So many of us have spent so much time, in the scientific, intellectual side, which is incredibly wonderful and value. Maybe you've been looking at food and nutrition through the cultural lens. Maybe you've been gaining inspiration from others in the field and learning from their experiences. All those are incredible and amazing. And we all have this intuitive ability. And our focus tonight is to really kind of honor and hone that as a skill. We're also going to uncover an answer to the question, does your body speak to you, right? Can you have a communication? If so, how and what ways can you listen and speak back to your body? There are, in fact, 6 powerful mediums your body uses to communicate with you. We're going to go through each of those, and then you'll learn techniques to gain wisdom about the signs and signals your body gives you. And to finish, I'll share what I feel is the greatest nutritional secret of all time that has the power to free you from emotional and reactive eating, set you free from any dietary dogma or nutritional plan. So if that doesn't sound like too tall of an order, I'm excited that you're here and ready to dive deep with me. So, because it's never too late, right? You are never too young. You're never too old. You can begin to remember and trust the innate intelligence of your body. And if you didn't at least have some inkling that this was possible, you probably wouldn't be here, right? And though this ability is inherent, it is not how we were raised, right? From a very young age, we were told what to do, especially when it came to food. Eat up. I don't care if you're full. Eat what's on your plate. Every household had some iteration of that phrase, right? There's children starving in Africa. Eat what's on your plate. And, it became this kind of obedience, right? Where little Johnny, like, don't eat dirt. Get that out of your mouth. That's yucky. And we began to be steered by, the programming of our parents and our society and our community. And some of that, for good, and some of it for not so good. And here we are. Since then, throughout our lives, the voices of government, media, and industry have taken the place of our parents as well in telling us what, when, and how much we should eat. It is very rare in our modern science-based society that you'd be encouraged to follow your gut or to trust your feeling sense. To civilize your instincts has always been considered more advanced. In the pursuit of such defined progress, slowly we've lost our connection to that inner knowing of trusting our hearts and our own truth. I see the rise of the modern Western diet and lifestyle diseases as a symptoms of a society that has become blind and illiterate to the language of the body. You and I were not trained, nor were we given proper guidance when it comes to health. There exists a cultural gap where both ancient knowledge and daily practical advice has not been passed on. It's there a little bit, it's there in threads, but by and large, we really have not. We're told this to place this most precious possession of knowledge and health into the hands of others, right? Others who claim authority with titles and degrees. And most of us have accepted, right, that they know and I don't. This is one of the biggest issues of our time. And of course, there will always be a time and a place for working with various healthcare practitioners, including nurses, doctors, herbalists, shamans, healers, whoever you are connecting to, reaching out with. But ultimately, fundamentally, the first say and the final say in your health starts and ends with you, right? You alone are responsible for your health and your well-being for your body and mind. And I know you know that. That's why you are here tonight. And what you will learn today is that to care for yourself doesn't require a degree. In fact, no formal schooling is required. And that has been a big part of my journey, even going to nutrition school, coming out with a degree, a title that I could have used, claiming myself as a nutritionist. I decided not to, just to kind of help level the playing field, in the sense of offering more empowerment for others versus I know and you don't. So my name is Malcolm Saunders. If we haven't met before, thank you for tuning in tonight. The owner, creative visionary behind Light Cellar. And, for me, this journey of remembering and beginning to think differently started as a teenager, right? At least consciously. Maybe I always kind of had that inherent sense about myself. But, getting into, I guess, sex, drugs, rock and roll, look into the 60s, this idea of turning on, tuning in and dropping out, spoke to me, just feeling really disconnected from the society that I was being raised in and seeing that dissonance and not wanting to kind of be a part of that. And from that place, I evolved into kind of deeper, more conscious ways of being, studied yoga, did meditation. As I mentioned, formerly studied nutrition, tons of food preparation work in kitchens all over, again, formal and informal. in my journey has always had this thread of a desire and a true need to recreate my relationship to food, choosing to no longer eat the standard American diet, of the mainstream. There's that saying, "You are what you eat," and I did not want to be junk food anymore. It's taken me a long time. Today, I'm found myself, immersed in the world of health, superfoods, and I feel what we're going to get into is the forefront of real holistic nutrition that's empowering, going beyond dietary dogma. So let's start with a little quote here. Apparently this was attributed to Einstein. He says, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." Another quote in the words of one of my favorite authors and mentors, Stephen Buhner, who I mentioned right at the top of the hour there. This beautiful quote, he says, "The gathering of knowledge directly from the wildness of the world is called biognosis, meaning knowledge from life. And because it is an aspect of our humanness inherent in our physical bodies, it is something that everyone has the capacity to develop. It is, in fact, something that all of us use, at least minimally, without awareness in our day-to-day lives. There are threats that come from the dominance of one particular mode of cognition to the exclusion of all others. To correct this imbalance, we need to come to our senses, to reclaim the ability each and every one of us has to see and understand the world around us. An ability that has been built into us over evolutionary time." So again, that was Stephen Buhner from his book, The Secret Teachings of Plants, The Intelligence of the Heart and the Direct Perception of Nature. And by the way, you are intuitive, But what does that mean, right? Intuition. Just, you can, type in what that means to you. Intuition, your own kind of sense, perception of that, or just reflect in your own mind. Seth Godin, kind of, business mentor, marketing type personality. He describes intuition as successful decision-making that happens without a narrative, right? And that intuition isn't guessing. It's sophisticated pattern matching honed over time. So that's how Seth Godin describes intuition. Claudette says it's an inner body knowing. Yeah. All right. Let's refer to the dictionary here. Dictionary definition. There's a couple of them I compiled. One is the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. Right? An example would be, we shall allow our intuition to guide us. Another definition, a quick and ready insight. And there's synonyms, right? Instinct, intuitiveness, sixth sense, clairvoyance, second sight. More definitions, the power or faculty of attaining to direct knowledge or cognition without evident rational thought and inference. That idea, direct knowledge, that's exactly what Stephen Buhner had said, right? The gathering of knowledge directly from the wildness of the world is called biognosis, knowledge from life. Another dictionary definition, a thing that one knows or considers likely from an instinctive feeling rather than conscious reasoning. Synonyms, a hunch, an inkling, a suspicion, an idea, a sense, a notion. But isn't it interesting that to me indicates that that's where science begins, right? You start with an inference, a sense, a hunch, right? You want to prove out your hypothesis. So at the foundation of science, I believe, is our own intuition. So from those definitions, right, the inner body knowing, as Claudette put it, we're able to get a sense, a feeling of intuition and understand what it is. And did you pick up from those definitions that we humans have distinguished that there are two different ways of knowing? right? They were clues in the definitions. A thing that one knows from instinctive feeling rather than conscious reasoning, right? Attaining direct knowledge without evident rational thought and inference. So intuition is quick, it's ready, insight, something instinctual, versus reasoning, rational thought, analytical thinking, where we have to use logic and we think things through, right? And I'm not saying either one is better than the other. It's just we have two different ways of knowing. So you are not only an intuitive being, but also a rational being. We can be of two minds, thinking and feeling. But what does it mean, this idea to feel, right? It's not simply, you feel the heat of the kettle. There's in fact three ways to feel, right? You can feel the heat, you can feel the cold, that type of feeling. You can feel the sharp point of a pencil or a knife. You can also feel unwell, right? You feel under the weather, you feel sluggish, you feel tired. That's another way of feeling. A third way is when you meet somebody, right? Or you walk into a room and you get a feeling of the room, or you meet someone for the first time and you get a feeling of them, right? That's the third way of feeling, a deeper way of feeling. So we are sentient beings, and sentience is the ability to feel, perceive, or experience subjectively. It's that sixth sense of feeling. I'm sure we've all had that experience of someone telling you one thing. Perhaps it's a salesman. Perhaps it was one of your children. Right? What they're saying sounds very logical, very convincing, but another part of you is just feeling, no, that's not quite right. Maybe in the last 2 years, you heard these politicians, tell you one thing. You're like, yeah, there's a feeling that's like, something is deeper beyond the surface. So we can orient ourselves and gain wisdom through feeling. Ancient philosophers distinguished between the ability to think, reason, from the ability to feel, sentience. Yet in our modern culture, in modern society, we place an almost absolute value on the attainment of knowledge through the rational mind and the intellect. And for those of you that are part of that Buhner workshop, he brought up this statement, cogito ergo sum, right? It was Descartes' famous, I think, therefore I am. That's what put us at this kind of pinnacle above all species of life, is what we think, right? Therefore, we're the greatest. And that thinking was proof, validation of our existence. And in Western thought, this solidified the foundation for what placed man above all else. Whereas Homo sapiens, which means wise beings, we are supreme. And of course, as animals, they have instincts, they have sentience, they feel, they have instincts, but us, we're special, wise beings because we reason, we have this intellect. Yet sapience is the ability to think and act using knowledge, experience, understanding, common sense, and insight. Sapience includes sentience, and it is the ability to think, to feel, and reason. So Buhner did this kind of shift where he talks about sentios ergo sum. I feel, therefore I am. So thinking gives you knowledge, but we know true wisdom is something else, right? When you can embody that in a much deeper level. You can think it, but we feel so much more confident when it's deeper, when you feel it, you know that to be truth. We can learn a lot about a subject through studying, reading, but when you've lived it, you've experienced it, and you feel it, you know it from that deeper place, then, only then does it become wisdom. So this sentence, this feeling, our intuition, we all know it. It is real, it is valid. You are intuitive, and it is innate in each and every one of us, right? We have phrases in our culture and our language to describe and validate this. I knew it, my gut told me so. I just know in my heart, this is true. What are some of the phrases that come to your mind that you give this affirmation to, that you've said to yourself or you've heard others say, right? Something doesn't quite feel right. I just don't trust him. I could tell and knew the moment I saw them, right? This kind of knowing, it's visceral, it comes with a feeling. As I mentioned, you go into a restaurant, immediately you get a sense, a feeling of the place. And maybe you go somewhere else, right? This is not the place we want to be tonight. Going down that back alley, ooh, something doesn't feel right. There's that instinctual, and it's tied into your preservation. Yeah, Donna, gut feeling, awesome. Intuition, it can be loud, clear, and profound, or sometimes it's very subtle, isn't it? Just kind of like a simple, gentle knowing. And obviously it's easier to be amazed by or think about. We want to share those kind of bigger, more profound examples, right? Because those more small, subtle, everyday experiences of intuition, they don't stick out as much. Example of a time I was in Vancouver. I experienced that inner knowing, that speaking to myself internally. I had just finished college, moved away from home, and was in that phase of my life where I was hitchhiking around, living out of my backpack. And I had just landed in Vancouver, found some friends, was going to move into their house, got it all set up, and I went to the local Safeways to go get some groceries. First night in the house, and we're going to do dinner, buy some stuff to contribute. And I was young, adventurous, still had maybe some bad habits from when I was younger. And I used to have this habit of, and these were back in my kind of vegetarian, carbitarian days, where I just, I was looking for energy at the bottom of it, right? My diet wasn't so good, and I love sugar. I had this major addiction to sugar, cookies, anything baked. And so sometimes I'd be shopping, you know how it is, you put stuff in your cart, and I had some cookies, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna eat a cookie, while I walk around. And sometimes when you get to the till, you tell them you had 4 cookies in the bag, when in fact there were 5, or how it was. Anyways, and so there I was, just kind of doing my usual thing, and I'm eating my cookie, and I go down one aisle, and I just kind of got this sense of like, there's somebody behind me there. And I go down the next aisle, and I'm like, oh, sure enough, there's that guy again. And I kind of make a little bit of eye contact with him, and I just carry on my way, fill in my basket. And, he goes his way, and I'm doing my thing. And then I go up to the till, and then all of a sudden, here's this guy. In a normal circumstance, like, there's no reason I should even suspect this man. Just pure coincidence. We're just both there in the night shopping. But again, that little voice in the back of my head, just that sense. It wasn't even like verbal at that point. It was just, hey, pay attention, be aware. And groceries are getting checked out. And she asked, she's like, is that all? And I hear this little voice goes, tell her about the cookie. And I pause. And then the voice again, in a loud, like booming voice, tell her about the cookie. And I says, oh yes, and a cookie. And as soon as I said that, the guy behind me takes off. He was obviously a secret shopper, and that would not have been, a good welcoming to my new life in Vancouver, having gotten arrested for shoplifting a cookie. So, that was a time where it was just so loud, so clear and audible that I got the message. Meeting my wife, when we first met, we just kind of knew, right? There was just that strong inner knowing that it's like, oh, hello, we're going to spend the rest of our life together. And that wasn't anything that I even fantasized about. I never thought about like soulmates or had words even for that. But, when I met Laura, it was just that inner knowing, just like we both knew it. And our first year on the road, we got to know each other by traveling. We went to all throughout Alberta and BC. Chris says, now I want a cookie. For sure. So in our journeys, Alberta, BC, Scotland, India, Nepal, and, Laura actually, when we were over there, we both got very, very sick, and she ended up getting hepatitis. And we know the exact, town, the exact food stand, the exact moment that she got that. And again, it was one of those ones of just like, yeah, this is kind of sketchy, right? I'm not really sure about this food, but we were hungry, and, sometimes you learn from not listening to your intuition as much as you do by listening to your intuition. And it's about recognizing that feeling. And once you do, right, then you can start to apply it to other areas. And that's what tonight is all about. It's like, how can we recognize that voice and build and develop it and start to relate it to other areas? You know, when I shifted from vegetarian, I had no idea about food at all, right? I described my FQ, my food intelligence was very low. I had, you know, no initial knowledge or wisdom when it came to food and nutrition, but there was that internal, instinctual, intuitive self, and very often was in conflict with the intellectual side that was saying, well, this is the most perfect diet, this is what you need to eat, and the physical body and the signs and the signals that I was receiving were in conflict. You know, intellectually got into being a vegetarian, again, from an intellectual standpoint. And I kept thinking, well, if I just, you know, change and shift and do it right and, you know, build and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, you know, my intuition came out. I couldn't deny that part of myself any longer. Okay, I'm just going to skip ahead here, just through some of my notes. Yeah, that was a long journey with the vegetarian, and probably the biggest part of what helped, you know, develop my intuition. Having gone down a path that intellectually I was so convinced about, you know, reading the books, watching the documentaries, you know, studying it, doing it, but yet, right, when I looked in the mirror, you know, I was doing everything right. All I saw was a reflection of pale skin, and I did not see health and vitality. And the ego got in the way of like, no, I'm right. Thought I knew it, but yet it was the messages were coming through. I'd start to, all these kind of synchronicities, where Buhner says, you know, these golden threads, these things would pop up. I'd be listening to a podcast, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, you know, the person being interviewed would go into their story of how they were vegetarian and they shifted, and, you know, a very similar kind of path, or reading articles. And then even to the point of having dreams. Like, my body was so desperate to get that message through that I no longer could deny it. Okay. Yeah. And then, you know, it got into this thing of like, you know, dogma versus biology. So there was a place where I just decided, you know, again, like a science experiment, I'm just going, this is how I'm kind of feeling. This is the message I'm getting. I'm just going to let all that intellect, all that reasoning of why I had convinced myself, I was trying to convince others to eat in a certain way, just to let it go and then let my body experience, right? Is milk murder, right? Does meat rot in your colon? These kinds of things that I kind of, you know, read about and filled my mind with, and then put that aside just to experience it neutrally, objectively. And it was phenomenal to the point where, okay, I can't deny that experience and what my body is feeling and what it's trying to tell me. And then it was just a matter of getting over that, unlearning and relearning, and coming back to true intuitive eating, and a very humbling experience. So when we talk about intuition and feeling, and, you know, and I've shared some stories about, you know, stealing cookies, and, you know, meeting my partner in life and traveling, but, you know, how does this relate to food? Well, it relates, you know, so keenly because our primary way that I've noticed that we orient to food is through feeling, isn't it? So when you think about, or rather feel into it, right, these phrases, again, in our culture, what do you feel like eating? So when you ask yourself, when you ask a loved one, right, what do you feel like eating tonight? That's typically the phrase that comes out, right? It's like, the answer, I feel like something refreshing, or I feel like I need some protein. I feel like I need something, right? You feel into that. Kids will often say, I don't feel like having that. And what is our response as parents, right? Well, I think you should eat what you're told. Or maybe you're at the restaurant, how often you say, you know, do you say like, I think I should have the steak? No, you look at the menu and you go, I feel like having the steak. Do you feel like having some wine? But we often become, disconnected, or that intellectual side will override. And it's like, no, okay, I think I should have this. I better have that. But our natural orientation towards food is through intuition and feeling. It's instinctual. So it's intimately related to survival. Our instincts are there so we know how to survive and protect ourselves. All sentient life, again, those with the ability to feel, perceive, and experience subjectively, which includes humans and animals, possess this instinctual way of knowing, right? Your dog, your cat. How do they know what to eat? How to care for themselves when they're sick? When to eat, what to eat? It's on that instinctual, intuitive level. Have you heard that when an animal like a lion hunts, when they take down a prey, they go for the organs first and then the marrow and so on, right? Is that a conscious, thinking, rational decision? Or it's just that instinct, that feeling, just going for it. They know where the goodness is. Or a deer in the forest. Maybe I should eat my placenta today after just delivering my baby. Or how about the diet of a koala? Eucalyptus. Doesn't it want to try something else? It's almost hardwired in. But humans, do we still have the same intellectual and instinctual knowing, right? Our intellectual side often takes over. And it's kind of that blessing and the curse, right? I'm glad that we're not purely just driven by instinct, that we have this ability of the intellect and free choice and so on and so forth. So it's about, kind of a marriage, a blending of those two. All right, Dawn is adding in, food is closely connected to feelings from our memories. The smell of cinnamon reminds of our grandmother's apple pie and the feelings associated with our relationship interactions with her. Yeah, totally. So what about humans, right? That the same type of instinctual knowing. Do we have that as humans? Like that we truly know deep down, like what is good food and what we should eat? To answer this, we can look at traditional cultures and indigenous people. And by the term indigenous, I mean by the definition of originating or occurring naturally in a particular place, right? To be native. Which brings up an interesting side point. I always ask people, are you native to where you live? Do you naturally occur where you live? What is inherently natural to you? It's a tough one in our modern cultures. There's so much what we would describe as unnatural. And this is kind of where we veered off the path. And, it's why I don't mind being called a hippie, in that sense of just I'm just trying to do what's natural, because I see what is natural as the highest state. And if we go back to phrases in our culture, what's the highest compliment you can give somebody? The highest compliment is you are a natural. And what's the best advice you could ever give somebody? Just be natural, right? I think nature and our own inner nature is our highest state. And for me personally, I'm trying to make that, distinction of what is natural and what is unnatural. And our biggest barometer for that is how we feel, right? This feels good. This feels natural versus this feels really unnatural, really uncomfortable. We get caught up in normal though, don't we? Yeah. So is it time to go native? I think so. Truly indigenous people, without the distinctions of East, West, First or Third World, right? And their cultural traditions, regardless of where they live in the world, have had a knowledge and knowing about the function of their bodies, the earth, the stars, the ecosystems, their medicines for millennia, which today our science often correlates and confirms, whether that's Chinese, Amazonian, European, or Ayurvedic systems. But how did they know, right? And how can we also know in that same way too? This is this relearning. Stephen Buhner, who we quoted earlier, maintains this knowing is inherent in all life, right? The idea of the bionosis, gathering knowledge from life. Where as a herbalist, you could find out from life itself what a certain plant, herb, or food may be good for, right? Beyond just book learning. We can definitely, this is about including both. We can learn from books rationally, intellectually, we can learn from others, we can pull from culture, but can we? I say, yes, we can. It might be a journey to get there. We've got to practice. We can too learn from nature, and we can begin to discover for our own selves what certain plants are good for, what remedies to choose, use, and when and why. Buhner did this interesting study where he asked the question, how did indigenous people know what they know? The answer, and so he asked, right? So he asked all these indigenous cultures around the world, and yet received unanimously from them all that they used their intuition, that they learned from the plants themselves, right? This other faculty of knowing, the one without narrative, the one connected to, or you could even call your instincts, that quick and ready insight. Dave Wolf defines modern day herbalism simply as the institutionalization of wild food intuition. Herbalism, which is wild food wisdom, begins with this ancient inherent way of knowing and involves using your other organs of perception and knowing beyond just the brain and its thinking. It's using all of your other faculties, coming to your senses, literally. Science is confirming that you have 3 organs which have dense, complex neural networks that could be considered brains or mind, that has consciousness, the ability to perceive, process complex information. That is the brain, the heart, and the gut, right? We've all heard this idea, the gut is the second brain. And there's a lot of science that points to the heart also being a brain. The Heart Math Institute, as an example, states, the heart is in fact a highly complex, self-organized information processing center with its own functional brain that communicates with and influences the cranial brain via the nervous system, hormonal system, and other pathways. These influences profoundly affect brain function and most other bodies, the body's major other organs. Buhner, in his book, explores the techniques used by indigenous and Western peoples to learn directly from the plants themselves and demonstrate it is through the heart. He says, all ancient and indigenous peoples insisted that their knowledge of plant medicines came from the plant themselves and not through trial and error experimentation. Right? There are in fact 2 modes of cognition available to all human beings, the brain-based linear and the heart-based holistic. The heart-centered mode of perception can be exceptionally accurate and detailed in its information gathering capacities if, as indigenous and ancient peoples asserted, the heart's ability as an organ of perception is developed. Yet here we are in our kind of modern culture, we still have trouble, acknowledging this, let alone getting to the work of developing it. So, what we're exploring tonight, could be described as cutting edge, but still yet to be determined. Or for some, this is just total phony baloney. I love Buhner. He gave this example of how just the absurdity of, this conclusion that indigenous people came to the conclusions they did through kind of, linear trial and error, right? One variable at a time. Absolutely impossible. He gives the example of sage, right? Not just one culture, but separate, distinct cultures all around the world came to the conclusion that sage dispels bad spirits, negative energy. Right. And so he gives an example of, okay, let's imagine, way back, caveman times, there's a sense of, a negative spirit around here. There's some bad energy. Well, I'm going to try this grass, right? See if we can dispel that. I mean, that alone is a big giant leap that you would even think, oh, a plant might have something to do with this. Then the next big giant leap is that, well, how do you prepare it? Well, do I burn it? Do I brew it into tea? What do I do with it? Okay, let's say he figured that out, trial and error, and came to the conclusion that, nope, regular old, grass doesn't do it. How about this leaf? How about this bark? How about that? By that time, right? Or you can take any of these examples, a cut, a burn, a wound, eating a mushroom, people would have died out long ago. That the only way they would have come is just this inherent knowing to come to those conclusions, trying it out, seeing it works. Wade Davis, he's the author of One River, Journeys and Explorations in the Amazon Rainforest. He works for National Geographic. That book about the Amazon, part of that book is exploring ayahuasca and the shamanic traditions. And he says, just imagine in the Amazon, a forest full of thousands and thousands of plants, right? More diversity than you see in your local ecosystem. The fact that they came up with, okay, you take this and you take this and you combine them in a certain way and you produce this, right? By trial and error of one variable at a time, absolutely impossible. You would never, ever be able to come to that conclusion. So there's just so much proof there's obviously this other way of knowing. And for us, it's about acknowledging that, going back to that, working and developing that. Claudette's sharing the ability to talk with nature, plants, trees, and animals. First Nations people are light years ahead of many of us in this language. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think this is politically correct. Who knows these days? But my friend Yarrow, he gives this great suggestion, this wording. He's like, you know what? He's like, I honor First Nations. Not even about that. He's like, I'm a second nation, right? That idea of like becoming native to this land, becoming indigenous. And I know that might tread on sensitive territory for some, but it's we can become of this land truly, right? Like a second nation. Why not? And we can honor the First Nations that were here and their knowledge and learn from them on how they showed up in this place, in this unique space where you live, right? They thrived there for thousands of years. Could have been proved? Yes, absolutely. And we now have access to, more tools and science and so forth that can add to our lifestyle. But there's definitely this foundational way that they were so skilled in, as Claudette shares, that we can learn from. But again, in our modern society, we've given such a high, almost absolute importance to reason and rational thinking, right? It comes back to that that Einstein quote, right? We've forgotten the master-servant kind of relationship. We're all about, I think, therefore I am, this one way of knowing. It's like we so highly praise our right eye. Oh, my right eye is just so wonderful. Look at all the things I can see, right? And we forget we've got two eyes, two eyes to navigate this world, to see and to learn. We come to only see half the picture, view and understand the world in just one way. But remember, you are intuitive, and you have this other faculty of knowing. And the connection is through feeling. It is the gut, the heart, and the limbic system of our brains that are connected to feeling, this intuition. And it is the neocortex that is this wonderful cognitive thinking analytical part of your brain we call the rational mind. Your limbic system, some say, the lizard brain connected to your lower instincts. Socially, we've tended to diminish feeling and move to civilize our instincts. To civilize means to bring to a stage of social, cultural, and moral development, considered to be more advanced. I mean, we're talking about the First Nations as you bring that up, right? What were the residential schools? They wanted to school out the Indian. They wanted to civilize all these, if they just didn't outright kill them and exterminate them, the next was to kind of, train them in our way of thinking and being, to the detriment of not only them, but us as well. So as quoted before, here it is, there are threats that come from the dominance of one particular mode of cognition to the exclusion of all others. To correct this imbalance, we need to come to our senses, to reclaim the ability each and every one of us has to see and understand the world around us, an ability that has been built into us over evolutionary time. But how, right? Fortunately, in our culture, society, there's a renaissance coming back to trusting your own knowing and intuition. Before, you were burned at the stake or all kinds of things, right? And still, we face that challenge. But did you know there has been one area throughout time where intuition and feeling sense has been acknowledged? Not only acknowledged, but appreciated, developed, and applied without question. What part of our society and life is that? That, of course, is the arts, right? To be an artist. The arts is somewhere where we trust and follow our intuition. We connect deeper to those ways, other ways of being and intelligences. I'm sure we got a few artists on the call tonight, right? Just the fact that you're drawn to this, we more orient that way than an engineer. And neither is right or wrong. We're just on different ends of the spectrum. And wherever we come from, I think the goal of human life is to develop both those faculties. We might be kind of positioned to have gifts in one area more than another, but we need to develop both. And my experience with music, I love jazz for many reasons, but ultimately I love jazz for its complexity and the improvisation, most importantly, right? Like there's a lot of really complex classical music that's amazing, but there's something, especially playing it, it's that improvisation. So jazz to me is that magically spontaneous, let it flow experience. But yet at the foundation, it's rooted in technique, it's rooted in form, it's rooted in structure, it's rooted in this kind of other cognitive ability. So some of the best jazz musicians, or some of the best musicians in general, right, jazz or any other genre, are those who can play music perfectly as it is written, straight off the page, but simultaneously playing from the heart, giving it feeling. They can be of two minds. And this is where, what I've taken from learning from Buhner, from, applying it to food and nutrition, going through music school, I now apply it to everything in life. I grew up, I'm sure some musicians that grew up, playing music very kind of intellectually, right? The great grade conservatory, like my wife, she went through all the grades, did recitals, played the classical music, like beautiful stuff, very complex music off the page. Ask her to improvise. Well, she wasn't so good at it, right? Something that she didn't work on, didn't develop, wasn't a part of her musical training. Whereas myself, I was completely by ear, and I had other friends that were just phenomenal at it, right? They could just listen. They knew exactly like how to just replicate it. They could flow their way through a song. They could write, well, not even write, but just come up with music that was incredible. It made you feel good. Ask them to write it down or what key is it in? They didn't necessarily know, not all of them. And so I had started playing music from that realm, and I wanted music just to be my life. As a teenager, that was it. I was obsessed. I wanted to live, eat, and breathe music. And when my parents said, okay, you're nearing the end of high school, you're going to go to post-secondary, we've got this, college fund for you. Where are you going to go and what you going to do? And the answer was pretty clear. It's going to be music. And it was an interesting transition for me because I been so immersed in the world of just jamming, right? Played in bands, I played in bars, I jammed on the street, just playing music from ear and by heart. And then going to school, I had to develop this intellectual side. When I applied to go to school for music, they said, we're great, we want you for your skills, but before we can let you in, you need to, create some foundation here. You need to know what scales are. You need to know how to play the piano. You need to be able to read music. And so I went this kind of very intensive year of grade 12 where I kept my kind of jamming, but then I had to learn all that just to kind of get into school. And then school flipped where I went completely the opposite way. And isn't this the way, right? I don't know, at least for me, I learned by going to extremes. So I went from completely like intuitive, feeling music to really thinking about music and deeply into the intellectual analytical mind, so much to the point where I actually lost my connection to music, where I'd play something and I'd be like, is that right? And I would constantly question myself, am I doing this right? And I wasn't alone. There were so many of us in college. We actually had to have a guy come in and give us a workshop on how to play one note, right? To get us out of our heads, back into our hearts, back into that feeling sense and that inner knowing that we could play music. And that was just the journey. And I totally admire musicians on both sides of the spectrum, but most especially those that have mastered both ends of the spectrum. And I see that anything I approach in life, whether it's business, whether it's public speaking, whether it's, you name it, it's both are good, they're amazing, and one can choose either end of the spectrum. But my personal perception and goals and ambitions is to be in the middle, where I've gone to both sides and extremes, and I've been able to master them and harmonize those ways of knowing and thinking. So anything in your life where you can think of that, you relate to that, have that in your mind as you approach, an art or a skill, where you can bring in both elements. So we got, okay, Claudia again, our high self communicates with our heart first quickly, and then it can be translated through our brain. Although this doesn't always happen, especially with unbalanced heart energy, block chakra in this area, we've been much more indoctrinated to value only the intellectual mind. Yeah, forgotten the wisdom of the heart. Absolutely. So, bringing it back to food, why can't feeding ourselves be an art also, right? Not just a science. What a different way to approach nourishment into living one's life. One of art, one of beauty, one of joy. And I saw this in nutrition school, right? And people who study nutrition and get into it, like intellectually, we lose our connection to what it just feels like to eat. And we set up all these rules of what we should eat and what we shouldn't eat. And I'm not saying that is right or wrong, or we should or shouldn't do that. I think, again, it's about harmonizing it, where you can intellectually understand it, but you can also just drop the dogma and center into heart space and go, you know what, I'm gonna eat this. Yeah, so if you can be different approach to nourishment, one of art, beauty, joy, one of feeling, connecting to your heart and your gut, being in your body, because it is about your body, right? Can you think like a nutritionist, but experience food like an artist? Can you harmonize the two minds like the great jazz legends of all time? If you can think like a nutritionist, but experience food like an artist, then you will enjoy greater health and happiness. You'll create better music. Your diet will be one of art. So what I'd like to invite myself and all of us to experience is that nutrition can be this harmonious blend of both thinking and feeling, science and intuition. And some say it is what our time in this age is all about, right? Going back to kind of, purely indigenous heart-based ways of living, it's not really on our plate right now, right? So Rudolf Steiner is quoted, what was once done intuitively must now be done consciously. So you need to elevate your instincts. You are intuitive, and there are two ways of knowing. Science and your intellect to understand, rationalize, validate, support, and explain. It's wonderful. But eating is a primarily intuitive process, and it's so directly and intimately related to the gut and to feeling, which talks to you all the time, doesn't it? Oh, my stomach is not happy, we say. You can listen to your gut, listen to your body, listening, trusting those signs and those signals, coming back to your incense, your senses, elevating your instinct. Your body is self-organizing, self-healing, self-repairing, self-regenerating, and it speaks to you all the time. Your body knows. Trust your body. You are intuitive. So here's a question. Do you think it's possible to know how to nourish your body, and with what, how much, and when? Do you feel like your body knows? Do you trust your body to tell you? In order to do so, you need to come back to your senses and tap into the 6 most powerful mediums your body uses to communicate with you. So we're going to get into the language of the body. How does it communicate with us? Well, it communicates to us through the senses, right? Tasting, touching, seeing, smelling, hearing. Carolyn shares, cooking. I used to use my emotion to decorate cakes and got recommendations because of my ability to create nice pieces, but then went to culinary school and lost that ability. Yeah, isn't that the way, right? So hopefully, you're on a path of kind of rekindling that, coming back and blending those two abilities. So tasting, touching, seeing, smelling, hearing, and feeling, right? That ESP, that extra sensory perception that we've been talking about. It's a process where we must use all of our faculties and senses like music or art, engaging both our conscious mind and our feeling mind, elevating your instincts and trusting again that part of yourself where you know, and that there's nothing new to teach, because that intelligence, it's innate, it's inherent. You already know. You are intuitive, you know, and you can sense your body speaking through signs and signals. So let's kind of really simplify this. Let's lay the foundation that your body knows. It is intelligent and it speaks to you all the time. And again, going to really simplify it. But what is the first sign your body gives you when you're becoming dehydrated, right? To let you know that you need to drink water, which I'm feeling that right now myself. I'm hearing the call, right? It's that kind of dry mouth, all kinds of different sensations in your mouth, like thirst. There it is. But if you didn't listen to that, what are some further signs that you're dehydrated? So Claudette says sometimes it's a feeling of hunger. Yeah. Bridget says it's a headache, right? Our body's like giving us all these clues, right? We can feel it as if like, oh, we feel unwell. We can also see it in the case of like, if we're peeing and our urine is like really dark, that can be an indication. Yeah, dry lips, totally, all these things. So our body speaking to us all the time, these signs and signals, it's just, we either don't pay attention to them or we haven't trained ourselves in the language of the body, right? And you're tired, you feel like shit, right? What's producing that? Biochemically, what's going on? What did you eat? What did you not eat? Is it the bacteria in your gut? You know, if we're trying to determine, you know, what to eat in our diet here, like if you're a koala, I think it's a pretty straight and narrow path, right? You have no choice. It's eucalyptus, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks in betweens. But as humans, we're blessed with this free choice, but we still need to align with our biology. Because if we don't, right, modern American diet, just look at the results. You know, that is reliably the only bad diet on the planet. And we see the results. It produces the most common diseases of the day, you know, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, you name it, right? But it doesn't happen overnight. It starts with these little signs, these little signals that turn, then we're out of balance, then it turns into symptoms and it gets worse and it's worse. So symptoms are just signs of being out of balance, right? Imagine if you got blood in your stool. That would be a really dramatic sign. So maybe I'm going to skip this part. I got this thing about like acute. Yeah. So developing our perceptions and then understanding this insight. So there's a whole spectrum of, you know, kind of reading our body, right? So skin is, it's like a book where we can, Chris says, my body wants chocolate a lot of the time. Yeah, we're going to get into that. About talk about cravings and that kind of thing, which oftentimes a lot of it's even on a microbiome level. We'll talk about that in a moment, but I did have a note here. Maybe it's worthwhile bringing up. Yeah, like depending on the bacteria in your gut, the good ones, they can produce antidepressant-like chemicals, or the bad ones can produce toxins that give you brain fog, lethargy, and you know, cravings. So a huge part of this intuitive eating we're gonna end up is addressing the microbiome and working with our bacteria. Okay, so skin. right? I mentioned as a vegetarian, one of the big clues that I got, that I just could not like deny any longer was just a pale face. I mean, it was just so obvious that like my skin was lacking color, or our skin is such a barometer. I mean, I'll get breakouts, I'll get little pimples, I'll get little redness. Those are all signs. Those are all the body talking to us, right? And you can tell when you see someone that's super healthy, there's a vibrancy, there's a radiance that they have, or you can see when someone is very sick. I personally don't have this experience because, like most of us, I haven't been around anybody that's in that dying phase of life. But from those that I have, like Stephen Jenkinson, he says, it's such a clear phase. You can tell, you can see it, you can almost smell it. He describes it when someone is dying. It's a very distinct phase, just as distinct. I've been around a lot of babies, like it's kind of the opposite end of that spectrum where it's so tangibly sensed. It was Yarrow. He was talking to a customer one time, and somebody was like, they were complaining about their skin, and he says, "No, you got to thank your skin, right? It's giving you the clues. It's giving you these signs that something you're eating is off, or something about your hormones is off. There's some imbalances there. So like your skin is amazing." Because I think this person had started off saying, "Well, I really had bad skin." And he says, "No, you have great skin for the fact that it is giving you these signs. It's doing exactly what it should be. And it's trying to come back into balance. And that's just part of what it's going through." So skin is huge. I mentioned things like urine, right? The smell of it, the color of it, the volume of it. Those are all clues how the body speaks to us. Stool, right? I'm sure you've seen those charts. What is your stool telling you? And this is where we're blending in that intuitive with the intellectual, right? Understanding. So, okay, that's what that is. That's what it means, based upon other people's experiences. But first, initially, it might just be, oh, that's off. That doesn't seem right. But how often do we accept what is right, what is wrong? I had a friend in junior high whose father, the Saturday ritual was to go to the bathroom. Right? Like once a week, he'd be in there for hours. That takes a long time of denying those signals of your body, not listening to your body, that you just accept, well, I guess I go to the bathroom for, once a week, and it takes me 4 or 5 hours. Bad breath, right? Or a change in breath. That's another very obvious sign or signal. Eyes are huge, not only the clarity, but maybe bags, maybe dark, puffy circles. We can go even deeper into, the art, the science of iridology. I trained with some iridologists years ago. I learned enough to know, wow, eyes really are such a window, and how that you can read the body and all its organs and systems and functioning, just by looking at the eyes. I didn't pursue it to become proficient at it, but it was enough. So not only in the iris, but even around the pupil, even in the reds of the eyes. And how people discovered that was through observation. One of the original kind of pioneers of iridology, the story goes, is that he noticed an owl that had, I think it was an owl. Anyways, some animal had, broken its wing or a limb, and then he noticed a mark that instantly had showed up in the iris of its eye, and that was kind of one thread that led him down that path to really more deeply study it. Tongue. What about, the Chinese tongue diagnosis? You can look up all these different, body charts, right? Hands, feet. Are there sore points in there? Tongue, it's like, okay, there's ridges, or there's a coating, or there's cracks. All these things mean something. And the first step is just being aware, paying attention, oh, that's new, or that just seems odd, or why is my tongue like this where their tongue is like that? And oftentimes comparing to babies. Babies will obviously come in inheriting certain genetics, so it's not like they're perfect, but oftentimes remembering back, oh yeah, I never used to have that, now I have this. What is that? Sore lower back related to specifically kidneys and adrenals. It was one of the staff years ago. I remember I wasn't complaining, but, mentioning to him just that, if I would teach a workshop, which, was on top of a regular day, show up at 9, work all day at the shop, and then have a class at, 6, go from 6 till 9, and then clean up and not get home till like midnight, be wired and bed by 1 or 2, and then wake up the next day and I'd have like a sore lower back. And I just kind of mentioned this, and he's like, oh yeah, that's your adrenals. You've depleted your jing, you've overextended yourself. It's like, so I'm very aware of that now. And I've learned how to kind of replenish that, or even most importantly, like prevent that, preserve my energy. But that became a very, became very cognizant of that signal, that sign. Hair, well, maybe less hair analysis, but definitely finger analysis, right? Little white spots or horizontal grooves or vertical little indents, ripples in your nails. All these things mean different things. You maybe heard like bumps on the back of your arm. Some of these, of course, take very focused study, that kind of intellectual side, at least, to start, kind of like we learn about herbs. But that first is just an awareness, being open to our body, listening to those signs and those signals that it's giving us. And then we follow that thread. Okay, what is this all about? Your body, it's a big open book, right? We just need to learn how to read it. And like processing, like any process of learning to read, whether English or another language, you start off super, super basic. And some of us will never go beyond that basic reading. Some of you are going to make this like an art form, a science, where you're going to become not only a master at reading your own body, but reading others, right? Like pulse diagnosis. Like how does somebody, like Chinese practitioner, just feeling a pulse on your hand go, okay, yeah, your spleen is out of balance, your liver needs some help, and da-da-da-da-da. It's incredible. You can become really, really fluent in this. So encourage you to, part of this journey, begin to learn about, explore these different mapping systems, ears, hands, feet, and you don't have to memorize it, right? In the beginning, at least anyways, just have that awareness, have that reference. And then obviously it's a journey to know what to do about that afterwards. And that's where working with a practitioner can help for that confirmation and that guidance. And sometimes it's purely intuition that leads you in the right direction to study, right? It's like, I'm kind of feeling like you should do this, or I should start doing this, or learn about that. But often we miss these cues. We've been raised in a way, or have trained ourselves to ignore, to not notice them. Just carry on. It's normal to have bad breath, right? So it's normal to only go to the bathroom once a week, right? But don't ignore even the most obvious of signs. Just because it's chronic doesn't mean it's normal. And isn't it amazing that your body, it'll never give up trying to get your attention. It will never stop speaking to you. It's always working in your favor, trying to do the best, right? You don't have bad skin. That's just part of its function. It's just working with what you're giving it. All right, so let's keep going, explore this idea that your body speaks to you in signs and signals, and apply it to food and what we take into our body. All right, so let's dive into its innate intelligence when it comes to nutrition, and that you can trust that and follow that. And we're going to take it kind of high level, look at the most essential nutrient that no one can live without, right? What is the most fundamental nutrient of all? Your body needs it every single second. Air, yeah. I was waiting for Chris to type in chocolate, or who said about cookies earlier? Yeah, Chris, again. Yeah, well, that too. All right, so air, right? So the most fundamental nutrient. So if you think about being on a beach or in a lush green forest, maybe there's even a waterfall near you, right? Instinctively, we want to breathe deep, right? You just like, the prana, you can feel it when the air is clean, it's fresh, it's oxygenated, it's full of negative ions. Your body instinctively responds. It knows this is good. Take it in, right? You want to breathe deep. Now imagine you're on a subway. It's rush hour, or the C train in the case of Calgary, right? End of the day, we're on a bus, we're all packed in tight, shoulder to shoulder. You've got a mask on, like, or whatever, right? Instinctively, you're not breathing too deep, are you? Right? It's kind of shallow breath. You're just kind of like there. You're not taking it all in. Or as Buhner describes, these sensory gating channels, right? Like when you're in a forest, you just open right up. But in these environments, like, okay, you're obviously physically compressed, but you could even be in a wide open space, in a warehouse or something, right? That has this kind of, a dingy office. It's like, yeah, you kind of close off. You get into this like shallow breathing. You can sense that there's depletion in the air. So there are different types and qualities of air, different situations that create circumstances which alters the quality, and your body knows. And of course, it's essential that your body knows and can discern the most fundamental of nutrients, right? You are intuitive, So let's look at the next most fundamental nutrient. Water, right? You can only go so many seconds without water. You can only go so many days without water. There are different qualities, in your body, whether you've consciously thought about it or experienced it, knows the difference, and it has a preference, right? You instinctually respond to what water your body prefers the most. I've had the blessing of traveling a lot, and Florida tap water, Las Vegas tap water, Los Angeles tap water, London, England tap water, not very good, right? Like, the taste, the smell, like there's this kind of instinctual repulsion to it. All right, Don is saying third is salt. Yeah, and talk about that one as a, cognitive dissonance that people have, right? I mean, I grew up with this idea that salt was bad. Yet your body craves it. It knows it wants it. And unfortunately, even when we're given, if you're limiting your salt take and all you have access to is just kind of that really refined process, you're going to be reaching for the chips to satisfy that instinctive urge. But if you upgrade the quality, your body will know it, will taste it, and preferentially take that. So spring water, right? The look, the taste, the feel of it, literally like going into your body, but also the environment of a spring water. It's why that whole, trend, or I don't even want to call it a trend or a fad, but it's why, like, when many of us became aware of spring water and harvesting it ourselves, it just became instant in terms of like, yeah, this is exactly what I want to do because it feels so good. And try it, experiment, have some tap water, have some filtered water, have some spring water. A friend of mine did this with her dog, and her dog, every time, spring water, just instinctively, intuitively know. And I believe we can get there too. So if you can do that for these, important nutrients, absolutely, we can do it with food. So begin applying your observation to food, one food at a time. And it was actually my mom who, interesting enough, who gave me this insight into this possibility. So Mom used to always snack on like baby carrots. And, she'd sit down, do the crossword or whatever she was doing. And, she'd always joke, that she would know just instinctively when she'd had enough. Because she said, well, the taste would change. She just thought, I know I've had enough. I just eat, and the taste changes. And they're like, I'm good, I'm done. I've gotten my fill. So we can kind of, starting with food, getting into this realm, one food at a time, and just notice through senses what might be the difference, the shift. Is it a taste change? A friend of mine, we almost nicknamed her Goji, because when she discovered and started eating goji berries, like almost obsessively, she would just eat gojis. And then all of a sudden, like, it was a few weeks later, after her of like months of just always carrying them around and snacking on them, we're like, oh yeah, we're the gojis. And she's like, oh, I haven't really even thought about that. Like, she was done. Like, whatever she needed from that, her body gave that to her, got it, and then it was just kind of out of sight, out of mind. A lot of pregnant women, that's a time where we tap in much more instinctively into eating dirt, that type of thing. Some of these cravings we think are kind of weird. So like, what's behind that? But we also need to create that distinction between, craving and habit. Sometimes we have just habits we get into where it's just, well, that's just what I'm eating, right? Versus consciously thinking about it. Is this really what we want? And getting into the mindfulness of it. And, as I alluded to earlier, can't have a conversation about cravings without talking about gut bacteria. It's said that we are more bacteria than we are human cells. So who's really running the show? I joked about, early vegetarian days where, sugar cravings, always looking for sugar, breads, pastas, these quick sources of energy, partly because I was not nourishing myself properly. So my body was just looking for any kind of a quick energy, but also, candida, it's kind of commonly known thing that they crave sugar. And it's kind of this, cycle. So rebalancing our microbiome is going to be a big part of this. All right. And a big part of this, tapping into our senses. The story your body is telling you is perceived through the senses. This is the language, the medium through which your body speaks. So would it not be sensible for you to develop a sense or sensitivity to your senses, becoming resensitized, right? Opening up those sensory gating channels, because most of us, we've closed them off, we've shut them down, just probably more to do to survival instinct, the environments that we live in. We don't want to kind of open up, as well as emotionally too. Sometimes we just no, I'm just gonna not listen, just kind of, or it's habit, that type of thing. So let's explore how we can use our senses as guides to select real nourishing food. There's a term called aesthesis, which is a noun. It's a capacity for sensation or feeling, sensitivity, perception. It is the root of the word aesthetics, which means a set of principles concerned with the nature and appreciation of beauty, especially in art. There's that word again. Can you think like a nutritionist, but experience food like an artist? Aesthesis, inherently in you, is a capacity for sensation or feeling, a sensitivity. So let's explore this connection of aesthetics and the senses, right? Using your senses and sense of aesthesis to guide you. So starting with what are currently the most heavily emphasized and recognized connections to our food. It's taste, it's smell, right? From there, as well as our other senses, we can receive direct chemical cues. And it's easy to experience, right? Examples are things taste good, they smell good. We select foods based upon that. Now, can you simply rely on a food tasting good and it being good for you? If we pulled someone off the street and simply told them to rely on their senses to select food, any food that appealed to their senses might not go so well. Because something has happened in our modern industrialized food supply, which challenges us, and it's altered our abilities to use and trust our senses. Our taste and taste buds have been perverted by industrially processed food. First, by it being refined and then overloaded, oftentimes with chemicals, excitotoxins, even just excessive amount of salts or fats, where we're hardwired to kind of be geared towards that, and they overstimulate the senses, right? Tanya's saying texture, another huge one, very important, right? And from this way of eating, there's a tendency to desensitize. It's too much. So which is why if you're going to recreate your relationship to food and become an intuitive eater, you need to shift away from the modern industrialized food system and back to whole foods, natural foods. There we were with that word again, right? Natural foods, nature, natural being our most highest state, ones that have a natural aesthetic and are inherently organic. If we want to rediscover, remember for ourselves our own true nature, and begin again, as Buhner says, to gather knowledge directly from the wildness of the world. We need to go back to the real world, back to nature, our own true nature. And foundation to that is natural foods, to those which haven't been adulterated, foods which have their own natural chemicals, which show up as authentic flavors, authentic colors and aromas that key the body into precisely the nutrients they contain. And yes, we can sense this, right? It's why a fresh, naturally garden grown tomato looks, smells, tastes, and feels better than the conventionally industrially raised hydroponic tomato found at the supermarket. And of course, there's a spectrum, right? From modern convenience junk foods, which is not even food, what Michael Pollan describes as edible food-like substances. When these are created, if they do start with anything natural, right, it's stripped away, refined away to leave just an empty mountain of bare calories, from either fat or sugar to salts to chemical dyes and colors and preservatives. They're added, all designed with the intent for profit, long shelf life, instant gratification over consumption. This is the kind of stuff you'll find as fast food in a convenience store. Pretty hard to be an intuitive eater within that environment. You can't say to somebody eating that kind of food, especially me as a young person, right? Oh, just rely on your senses, because we become desensitized. The food is adulterated, right? Just like the cigarettes and the pornography the convenience store sells. It's adulterated. Adulterated meaning impure, debased, cheapened in quality or purity. Then there are items you'll find in a conventional grocery store. It's food, but it's factory food, right? Chemically grown or raised in depleted soils with the use of neurotoxins like pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, larvicides, sometimes antibiotics, if animals. Here, industry has managed to mass produce something that at least resembles a natural food, but it's empty of its essence, of real nutrients. It's having been hybridized for characters and qualities that produce profit, not health. Factors like long shelf life, shippability, sugar content. Again, hard to be an intuitive eater. But the body has an amazing ability, despite it all, to work with these depleted, hybridized foods. Then, of course, there's an attempt to make these industrially mass-produced foods more organic, but the same principles of scale and production are applied. It's only slightly better. It's still factory food on an industrial scale, but done organically, right? This is your like Walmart organics, your Safeway organics. And don't get me wrong, these are sometimes the best options that people have. And it's an evolution from where we've gone and where we've been, but it's good that we're coming back to real food. People are getting into, local, craft, wild, right? To go deeper. And we can tell, we can sense the difference. We might not be able to articulate quite exactly what it is, but there's something different about wild food, natural foods. And if we want to live a life outside of the box, then we have to stop eating from the box. If you want to escape the factory life and mentality, then you can't eat food coming from such a big factory. If you want to gain knowledge directly from the wildness of the world, you need to eat food from the wildness of the world to begin to discern for yourself what is truly natural. What is your true nature? One thing we all want is something real, authentic, right? In food and in life. You can spot a fake, you can taste it. We have inherent sensitivity and aesthesis. There's an aesthetic with food you can sense and appreciate, right? Wild food. Artisan foods, right? Like what Dawn creates with her cheese and the relationship that she has with her goats. It's why the local, the artisan, the handmade, the heirloom, it's all about the terroir, the farm to table that has this story, that has this connection. To go deeper, we're demanding more, right? More beauty, more art, more life, more nutrition, because that's what our bodies want. It's why I'm into, superfoods and in the whole concept that implies. There's a shift from Wall Street to Main Street. We're getting there, right? We go to farmers markets, the farms themselves, join CSAs. We even become part of secret and illegal back alleyway transactions with the farmer to make it, who comes in town twice a week to deliver raw milk. We begin to grow our own food, wildcraft our own food. And we recreate our relationship to food, actively engaging in what I call our foodscape. This way of being is a different experience, and it creates a different world. Real food is food. It has nutrients and medicine in it, and you can sense it. You don't need a nutritional analysis to show you that it is nutritious. There are many clues and cues, right? Like it smells better. And oftentimes, again, it's in contrast as we go down this path. Maybe it's been such a long time, like it has for me, in eating synthetic food, in eating artificial foods. Once you go back, like you get on natural foods, it's just like, oh, it's like an assault on the senses. It just hits you. So the smell, but not in a synthetic way, but very well known that the aromatics, the volatile oils, the essential oils, they're active substances. It's part of how the plant communicates. It is the application of aromatherapy, where we are attracted or repelled by smells through our sense of aesthesis, right? Chemical versus natural. Seeing, you can see how vibrant a food is. Just again, that tomato analogy or the strawberry analogy, it can be an indication. We can also capture it through things like Kirlian photography. And it's these colors, these hues that are cues to the natural pigments, which are plant chemistry, like antioxidants, phytonutrients. How deep and true is that red? Or is it kind of neon and perhaps freakishly red? Your aesthetic sense, the more you begin to dial it in, will begin to tell you. And we need to further explore natural tastes, right? Learn to enjoy bitter, sour, spicy, sweet, salty, pungent, umami. They're all expressions of nutrition and a healing dance on the palate. And it corresponds to organs, energies, and medicine. Real food tastes better, and we know it. So leave behind the standard American diet with its shallow, over-exaggerated flavors that have no nutritional depth, no information, right? No biognosis. Otherwise, with them, we're just left sick, tired, hungry, and confused. Isn't that the state of most people in this world? And it takes time. It's a journey to get back there. But by connecting to the aesthetics, the natural colors, taste, flavors, and smells, textures, as you mentioned, of your food, your body attunes to it and is tuned by it. You elevate your instincts. Using your six senses to interpret the language of your body, you are intuitive. You can sense your body speaking through signs and signals, so that when you're nourished and in balance, your natural state is happy, healthy, radiant, and free. It's a journey to recreate your relationship to food, but it is so worth it, right? To move from processed food like substances to industrial factory food, to organic food, to wild foods, natural foods, superfoods. How do we get there? We just got to start where we're at, right? Doesn't matter the journey we're on. I started, from Pop-Tarts and cornflakes to where I am now. And it took some time getting there, but a huge part of it, again, in this contrast in creating a reset, is through fasting. It's very helpful to fast. It's very natural to fast. And we're one of the, only cultures of our time that really does not do this. All humans, whether it was by choice and or circumstance, humans fasted, and it's very natural and it's very helpful. And of course, there are many ways to fast. Fasting can be abstaining from one food, from one meal, or from many foods or many meals for an intentional or a short amount of time. You don't have to plan it in. It can be totally spontaneous, right? You can break a habit, say, you know what, I'm not going to eat that food or at all right now, because that's not what I feel like. I'm not being drawn. Am I listening to my body? Am I getting that signal that I actually need to eat, that I actually need to consume this? Do you listen, or do you keep with routine? Right? Fasting can be abstaining from food, just consuming water, juice feasting, or even eating only whole foods, right? Fasting from junk foods or processed foods. It's helpful for anyone who may still be eating unnatural foods. So you go on a whole foods cleanse, and then you come back in that contrast. Feel the difference, embody that contrast, right? When you eliminate refined and processed foods, it's how you reset your body. You reset your senses to become more sensitive again. If anybody's fasted, it opens up your sensory gating channels, right? You're fasted, it's like you hear more, you can see better, you can taste, everything just becomes so heightened. It's unbelievable, the state you can get into. And it's a great way and time to also rebalance your microbiome. So we did touch upon the importance of that, the influence that your microbiomes have on your mind with cravings, as well as with signs and symptoms. So during a fast, you can help reset the environment and the terrain for good bacteria, because they're absolute key part of your intuitive eating journey. So one of the ways I'll approach adding a new herb or food or whatever it is not only observing when I add it in, but sometimes also when I take it out. People ask, like, how do I know if I'm getting anything from this food? I've been eating it for a while. Try taking it out, in contrast. How do you feel without it? And then going back on it. Now, how do you feel as you integrate it back in? Yeah, and there's so many benefits to fasting. It's been studied that when you go without food for long periods of time, our body releases hormones that actually make us stronger, more mentally sharp. It's been demonstrated throughout history, all kinds of historical figures, including Jesus, right? What did he do? He fasted for 40 days, 40 nights to deepen his connection. Gandhi was a big proponent of fasting. So when you fast in part or in whole for a short or long period of time, you heighten and sharpen your senses. You elevate your instincts. You deepen your intuition. You become more sensitive, more awake, more aware, more conscious, which isn't that the goal of life after all, right? To be more mindful, more conscious. And it turns out the more mindful you are, the more nourished you'll be. So we're just going to kind of wrap things up here and bring it kind of to this final and what I feel is most important part that'll tie all this together. I hope will create the most impact in your life and will naturally heighten your senses and tune you into that deeper way of knowing. And I dubbed this the greatest, most powerful nutritional secret strategy of all time. Big praise here. No big marketing sales pitch here, but it is that of presence, of conscious eating. For the more mindful you are, the more nourished you'll be. We're in that state. There is no bad food, no right or wrong as to what you should or shouldn't eat. Let all the dietary dogma go. The do's, the don'ts, the should haves, the should not haves, like I did when I was a vegetarian, exploring coming out of that. Just let all that go and just came back to presence and tested for myself. Is this true? How do I feel consuming this food that I had vilified for so many years? The only important thing to do is to hold sacred communion with yourself in all that you do and ingest. That is what is important, right? There's a kind of obvious question, does eating matter, right? Of course it does. Should you text while you drive? No, you want to put 100% attention and focus into what you're doing because it's so important. But what about when you're eating? This is a reminder for myself, just as much as anybody else, where is my attention? Am I texting? Literally, figuratively, what has my attention? It's so easy to get distracted when eating. Have you ever had the experience where you've had your 100% attention on what you're eating, right? Perhaps it was after a fast. It's another way to bring that mindfulness in. It's like, whoa, you finally have that first bite of food and it's incredible. All your attention, all your focus goes there and it's so much more rich and enjoyable and satisfying. Or maybe it was a new fruit you'd never tried before, a dish that someone so beloved. We mentioned about mothers and grandmothers, and that association, those memories, right? There's that focus, that appreciation. You get to taste that, try that, and you want to take that in. What is our relationship to food? And do you think that this will have a more negative or positive impact on our body? Of course, more positive. So that's the trick. That's the secret, right? Is that the more mindful you are, the more nourished you'll be. You will absorb more, you'll assimilate more, you'll taste more, you'll enjoy more, which again, isn't that the point of life? And as you're doing that, as you're really tuning into your senses as you eat, you can tune more into the messages that you're receiving. You'll get those clues of, okay, I'm done, or I can stop, or this isn't really sitting well, right? I'm going to try something else. But we're too much caught caught up in distractions, right? Or that linear based reality. We forget this heart holistic space that Buhner mentioned. So I invite you deepen into the sacredness of all your food experiences. Let's get into that, right? Where with gratitude, you reflect on your food, its life, its wisdom, its source, while you prepare it, eat it, and digest it. It's another way of saying grace. To truly enjoy and experience every bite of food. And in doing so, you will notice you will chew more, digest more, assimilate more, and become wiser, right? Because my guess, just for virtue of you guys being on this call, I can assume that you already make good choices about the food that you eat. And that often what we need is just to get more out of what we already put into our mouth. And presence will do that, right? The more mindful you are, the more nourished you'll be. Where attention goes, energy flows. Not only will you become more deeply intuitive, the signs and signals of your body will become clearer. You'll become more acute, sensitized. And of course, as you start on this journey, like myself, I got to remind myself all the time, we're no perfect, and especially in our fast-paced culture, it's not conducive to eat in this way. And if you have family traditions or religious traditions of slowing, stopping, saying grace, that's incredible, right? So it might take time to develop that new habit, to cultivate awareness, this mindfulness, but the good news, it's worth it, right? Not only will your health improve, you'll taste more, you'll feel more, enjoy more, get more out of life, which is the point, right? In every moment, to be conscious, be awake, to be present, to take it all fully in, to not be distracted, not to be texting. And isn't food such a delicious and delightful way to practice that, right? If we can do that, that's that reminder. So we can begin to extend our awareness deeper into our food and nutrition, a more holistic way, coming from our heart space, from that gut space. We can observe and experience the deeper qualities, the subtleties, deciphering what is best. And this does include even the quote unquote, the bad stuff, right? If we get a craving, if we're in a habit of eating, like dropping all that and actually really embodying eating the donut or eating the pizza or eating, whatever we might be struggling with or, determine is right or wrong food, dropping all that and deeply experiencing it. Because I know in my experience, oftentimes when it's that forbidden food, like candy bars, like I used to kind of scarf down because I just wanted the sugar. I wanted the hit from the chocolate. And it would just be to kind of eat it as quickly as possible and just, like trying not to acknowledge that I was doing that. But what if I allowed myself, like, okay, this is what's coming up. I'm going to just be with it, right? And could I? And how far could I go, right? If I stopped, if I slowed down, what is the feeling of that candy bar, right? How does it feel on my teeth? How does it feel on my brain? Like, am I still in that same relaxed, comfortable presence to eat it? And if I am, great, awesome, right? There's no problems there. But if I'm not, then I'll start to notice like, oh, right, this is what happens, when I eat this thing and eat that way. And you more deeply embed and embody that wisdom that you can stop, we can slow down, we can maybe then shift some of those patterns. Yeah, well, we are nearing the end here. I've gone over time. I just, maybe in closing, I'll just say, as I started, right? It's never too late. You're never too young. You're never too old. You can begin to remember and trust the innate intelligence of your body, right? To recreate your relationship with food. It's an ongoing journey. Hope through our time together, you've gained some inspiration, some confidence, elevate your instincts, your sense of aesthesis, coming back to what is natural, to honor and develop both your faculties of thinking and feeling, right? Of our deep sense of knowing, harmonizing the science, the intuition, so you can think like a nutritionist, but experience food like an artist. And most importantly, I hope you'll be gentle and joyful in yourself, and realization that it's not about being perfect or having that 100% all of the time, crystal clear knowing of clarity, of unwavering mindfulness. Though we may strive for it, it's more of a process, right? It's an evolution, it's a journey. But just remember, you are intuitive, you can sense your body speaking through signs and signals. Explore that, learn that, right? Begin to cultivate that, and through that mindfulness, because the more mindful you are, the more nourished you'll be. All right. Okay, well, thanks everybody tuning in. Yeah, again, a little bit different than a lot of the presentations I do. Talking about, blending both those sides of having stuff kind of pre-written, I guess, versus most of the time I just kind of speak ad lib. But that's me just navigating through this content and sharing it. So feel free to share any comments anytime. Send me an email afterwards if there's any thoughts like, oh, that was really good, or here's something that I would love to see expanded on. Very, very open to that. So Donna says, Sai, it's not the one donut that is the issue, it's the whole box, right? Yeah, but again, slowing down, really feeling into each donut through the whole box. Harmony asks, what is the name of the author you mentioned several times? So Stephen, or I'll just type it in. So that's a PH. Beuner. Beuhner. Oh, I think that one went to you, Lena, directly. I'll retype it to the group. Yeah, okay, well, thanks a lot. Cindy, Allison, Chris, Dale, Carolyn, appreciate all the comments. And yeah, good. Inspired to go into a fast once again. Awesome.
Yes, thank you, Malcolm.
Yeah, thanks, Irene.
I found the intermittent fasting very, very effective when I did it 2 years ago. And then sadly, if you fall off the bus once, you should always try to get back on.
That's right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, everything I shared was all a good reminder for me as well.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, good. Well, thanks for tuning in, joining. All right. Okay, we'll leave it at that. I'll end the session, and yeah, have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, Malcolm. Good night.
You're welcome.
Good night to everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.